Whoa. Okay, thank you to everyone for coming. First, I would like to thank Rabbi Zisau and the JLC for hosting this event tonight with us with the Manalapan Jewish Connection. Thank you to Rabbi Jacoby for organizing the event. And I want to thank our... It's going to take a while. We do this for everyone. Thank you to our anonymous sponsor. May this event... Okay. She or he appreciates that clap. May this event be a schus for them and their loved ones. And I would also like to thank Dave Rosen for sponsoring all the food, along with Four Corners in Lakewood. Thank you. Okay, we are Manalapan Jewish Connection. We provide Jewish events and inspiration to the Manalapan Jewish community. If you have any ideas, you'd like to partner with us in any way, please let us know. Just some upcoming events and classes we have going on. On November 4th, Mrs. Atara Weisberger will be speaking about Easy Pass to Healthy Living, Food and Fitness when Life is in the Fast Lane. That's a women's brunch and class. December 8th, we will be having a Hanukkah party after Shabbos. There are many classes around town, not just with us, but with various shuls in the area, various synagogues. Especially at the Jewish Learning Center here, there are tons of classes ranging from topics like the laws of Shabbos, Jewish philosophy, the Torah portion, and there's a weekly lunch and learn given by Rabbi Kipper, a member here at Union Hill Congregation. If you look at the calendar in the back, it has a lot of the classes and when they are and where they are. If you're interested in any of those, you can get in touch with us. And if you'd like to receive updates about our programs and different things we have going on, you can sign up for our email updates outside. Dr. David Lieberman has a PhD. He is an award-winning author and internationally recognized leader in the fields of human behavior and interpersonal relationships. Dr. Lieberman, whose PhD is in psychology, lectures and holds workshops around the country on a variety of topics. He's authored hundreds of articles and 11 books, selling more than 3 million copies, including 2 New York Times bestsellers. He's given over 900 talks in 140 cities. He's appeared on ABC News, Fox, CNN, The Today Show, The View, and numerous other national programs. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. David Lieberman.
Wow, good evening. Thank you. Successful relationships with difficult people. I can't help but wonder if some of your friends and family aren't quite offended that you made a point of coming here tonight. But that's just it. When you're dealing with difficult people, they don't always realize how difficult they are. They feel like the entire world is out to get them. They continually play the victim card, and we end up falling into that trap time and time again. What I'd like to share with you in the next 45 minutes or so are some very practical tools and strategies to navigate relationships with difficult people. To that end, if you have any questions, comments, thoughts, anything is not clear, you want an example, need a clarification, please feel free to ask any question at any time. I like to make this talk as practical as possible. We can make it as interactive as feasible. So again, if you need a clarification, want an example, you didn't hear something because everyone is laughing so hard at one of my jokes, so I need to repeat it. All right? Don't think that's going to be a problem. It says nothing like a good joke, and that was nothing like a good joke. So, let's begin with the following. What is it about people that makes them so very difficult? Why and how does a person come to be difficult? Are they simply born that way? Is it because somebody brings it out in them? What happens along the way? So I'm going to share with you the psychology in a nutshell, and then we're going to just fork off into very practical ideas. But I think it's good to pull back the lens just to appreciate the larger perspective. In a nutshell, here's how it works. We're all wired to have a sense of self-esteem. We're wired to like who we are. Right? Why that's so, we'll get to maybe at some point. But for now, it's accepted parents. We're wired by God to have a sense of self. Now, if I don't like me very much, that's going to make me innately dependent on the rest of the world to feed me. Right? I need to feel loved. I need a sense of self-esteem. So it comes packaged in the form of respect. I don't respect me. I don't love me. Right? So I want other people to. But we're going to see that there's a fundamental flaw in that equation, because here's the problem. If I don't love me, I can't imagine why you would love me. If a person lacks a sense of self-esteem, a lack of self-respect, if they feel unworthy, regardless of what they portray and project to the rest of the world, they're going to have a very hard time feeling that love from other people. Because the question they ask themselves is, why would you love someone that's so unlovable? Now, we could have low self-esteem and not be difficult. Some of us here may very well not have the highest degree of self-esteem. Yet our personality is such that we're much more pleasant. And we're going to get into different personality types. But the person who innately does not love themselves has a hard time, right, accepting love. At the same time, they have a hard time giving and expressing love. As Rev Noach Weinberg of blessed memory used to say, if you don't love you, don't love me. A person that you give love, you give respect. So if I don't love me very much, what on earth do I have to give? Now we begin to see where self-esteem and difficult people overlap. And that is so much as the degree to which I don't like me, I don't love me, I don't respect me. I have a hard time accepting your love even though I desperately want it. I also have a hard time expressing it. And I feel very cut off and isolated. Okay. That's the rough psychology. But practically speaking, I'd like to share with you 7 specific tools and strategies how we can shift our mindset in dealing with these types of people, and then how to actually improve the relationship. Okay. Any questions? Once again, feel free to fire away. Number 1 is this. Just because somebody does something to us that we don't like, we have to appreciate that everyone in our lives, regardless of who they are, is a shaliach, a messenger from Hashem. Intellectually, we get it. But when you really own it, it says in the Talmud that anger is akin to idolatry. If I get angry at you because of something that you're doing to me, I'm taking God out of the equation. If we fully own and accept that everyone in our lives, no matter who they are, a parent, a child, a sibling, a friend, co-worker, spouse, is tailor-made, custom-made, perfectly crafted for our good and for our growth, we begin to ask ourselves the right question rather than complain about the reality. And the right question is, what is the message for me? You may find this experience that a lot of people have in dealing with difficult people. You're dealing with a difficult type of person. And for whatever reason, that person moves off. And somehow, in Shemayim, in heaven, they just stamped out another one to take a place. Like an assembly line. And they keep on coming. And you're like, wow, you're just... It reminds me of that old I Love Lucy with the chocolates. You know what I'm talking about? Right? It just keeps on going and going and going. And you're trying to keep up. The reason is because these people are not in our lives for us to fix them, to solve their problems, to educate them. They're there for our good and for our growth. We've got to wake up for the fact that we've got to ask ourselves the right question. When you begin to look at why they're in your lives and what's the message for you, you might just find a answer crystallizes. And then, once you understand why they're there, you can do something. But simply complaining, bemoaning the fate. You know, sometimes we talk to God like we're talking to the mafia. You know, God, you know I'd be so much more successful. I'd have so much more energy. I'd have more money if it weren't for you know who. And we bemoan these emotional vampires that drain our time, money, energy, and heartache. And it's sort of like, God, you didn't hear from me, but if this person should just, I don't know, not have an accident, but just, move or slip away. No, you didn't hear from me, right? We fail to realize, is they're here for our growth. We have to ask ourselves, what is the meaning? What is the message? What am I supposed to glean from it? And you entirely reframe the dynamics of the relationship. Number 2, just because somebody did something you don't like doesn't mean you have to get angry as a result. And here is why. There's a saying in biology that neurons, which are brain cells, that fire together, wire together. Meaning, every time there's a stimulus and a response, the connection between those neurons, called dendrites, grows stronger. Over a period of time, we rewire ourselves. The field of neuroplasticity talks and looks at just how malleable, changeable the brain is. We're literally reconfiguring it every time while you're listening to while I'm speaking, your brain is changing. So when you have a stimulus and response, when you get angry, you strengthen that connection, which is why we know people that have a hair trigger response to becoming angry. Because physiologically speaking, they've wired that connection. It's almost hardwired into their nature. But as Chazal, the rabbis taught us thousands of years ago, exactly what the research shows today, in as little as 30 days, you can retransfigure that connection and wire yourself to be able to be more calm, to be more relaxed. I came out with a book a couple of months ago called, wow, how embarrassing. Thank you. Wow, thank you very much. Did you read it? Thank you. No, yeah, it was going to come to me.
What's the name?
Never Get Angry Again. And I talk a lot about the psychology and the physiology, and we assume that it's all just sort of emotional or sort of, it's not. There's a lot of physiology that goes into it. And if we're able simply to, what happens is this, not only do those connections strengthen, but when we become angry, right, we lose our intelligence, our knowledge. And once again, this is something the rabbis tell us. When a person becomes angry, they lose their ability to think clearly. In Mitzrayim, in Egypt, right, we understand that when one frog came out, they banged on it, and all of a sudden what happened? 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, then I went into psychology, whatever that is. Right? They simply just, now, and we know this too, when we're sort of in that angry zone, that angry space, you simply cannot think clearly. Physiologically, it's interesting is that when a person becomes angry, the brain releases a number of hormones and neurotransmitters. One of them is called cortisol. It's called a stress hormone, also responsible for weight gain. And when sort of cortisol floods the system, right, it inhibits our ability to think clearly. This is something Chazal, the rabbis, told us thousands of years ago, and a physiological sort of underpinning is explained just very recently in psychology and in science, that it's this chemical, the hormone, cortisol, which interferes with the ability of the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for executive functioning. That's why we don't think clearly. So every time we become upset, we literally just wire ourselves to become more and more and more. And if you're able simply just to hold on and just maintain your calm, whatever it takes, you're going to find each and every time becomes easier. Also, by the way, we all had the experience of sometimes, something gets you upset, and it's almost like those dominoes that keep on going, right? So it happens also within that short space. The easier it is for you to maintain your calm in that moment, the easier it will be moments later and also down the road. So just something very important when dealing with difficult people. Next, if someone in your life suffers with emotional illness, it is not your job to fix them. It is not your job to educate them. It is not your job to cure them. It is not your job to introduce reality. This does not mean that you allow them to traipse into your boundaries in unacceptable ways, something we're going to get to, because we all know that difficult people have lousy boundaries. Right? By the way, is there anyone in this entire room does raise your hand if you don't have a difficult person in your immediate family circle? Right? Okay, one person in denial. That's it. Okay. Right. And you may be that difficult person to someone else. It's like, we have to appreciate that if someone is in our lives and 15, 20, 25, 30 years, stop banging your head against the wall. Sometimes we think that we are just one perfectly crafted sentence away from getting the person to see reality. And if we can just give them the right phrase at the right time, in that right space, we're good. It never happens. Ever. You have a conversation with this person, you think, oh wow, they're being very honest and very open, they're in a good mood, maybe a little self-deprecating. Let me go ahead and just introduce reality. And then every time you kick yourself for doing it. Because they do not hear it. If they did, they would have heard it 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago. Once again, it doesn't mean you allow them to traipse into your boundaries. We're going to get to that. What it does mean is recognize your job is not to change them, educate them, fix them. It is to accept them. When you decide that you're no longer going to rail against the injustice and simply accept this person, who they are, where they are, how they are, a weight is lifted from your shoulders. Because you're no longer waiting for that moment to try to fight reality, to try to introduce reason and rationale and infrastructure that is completely void of reason. There's a woman who sees me for quite some time, and she has never, ever, ever once listened to a single thing I've said. Now, I've told her on more than one occasion, you can go see somebody that charges half of what I do and ignore their advice. She goes, she wasn't even thinking, you know what she said? She goes, no, Dr. Lieberman, I only want to ignore you. And she goes, no. She didn't mean it as a joke. She caught herself. And then she, This woman, by the way, I was speaking to her on the phone, and I said, you know what? I said, you are absolutely delusional. So like any reasonable person, she hangs up. And then she calls back. And by the way, don't try this at home, by the way. Please don't tell anyone they're delusional unless, whatever. I said, and she said, you know what, Dr. Lieberman? When you said I was delusional, she goes, I was very, very upset. She said, I almost fell right off my unicorn. Now, I didn't know if she was making a joke or not. So what do? But I call this person my car person because I have to speak to her. And she knows this when I'm driving in the car or she will drive me, boop, boop, right? And so one time I'm driving and, you know, she's going on, and I remember we're heading up. I'm heading up actually to the Catskills, and it was Erev Shabbos, right before Shabbos. It was getting close, and Waze is taking me through the sleepy little town, and I'm at a four-way intersection. This was years before I wrote my book on anger, and the person in front of me, I admit, wasn't my finest moment, but she was just like becoming a crossing guard. Just meanwhile, I see the sun setting, and I'm, have a distance to go, and I, just, again, not my finest moments, leaned on the horn, and I just said, come on, enough of this already. I forgot she's here. All of a sudden I hear, Dr. Lieberman? I said, woohoo! And it took me a second to orient myself, and she said, you know what? That's exactly what I needed. I said, really? She said, yeah. She still didn't listen to me, though, but it was very profound. I thought it was a shkacha that this car was here. No, she still didn't listen to me anyway. But Lamaisa is, here's the thing. There are some people who, no matter what you say, no matter how you say it, are going to form their own conclusions irrespective of the truth. Which brings us to one of my favorite all-time stories about zombies. There's a man who woke up one morning insisting he was a zombie. Turned to his wife and said, honey, I'm a zombie. She said, you're not a zombie, go back to bed. He said, I'm telling you I'm a zombie. She said, I'm going to get your mother on the phone. Do you think this would be enough to shake any guy into reality? No, dice. Gets mom on the phone. Mom says, what's the problem? Son says, I don't have a problem. Melissa says, well, sweetheart, your wife, she tells me that you think you're a zombie. He says, Mom, I know I'm a zombie. She says, sweetheart, don't you think I would know if I gave birth to a zombie? He said, no, I became a zombie later on in life. Okay. Makes some point. Psychiatrist goes down. Psychiatrist, what's the problem? Now the guy's just getting exacerbated. He goes, I don't have a problem. The doctor says, well, I hear you think you're a zombie. The guy says, Doc, I know I'm a zombie. Psychiatrist says, let me ask you one question. Do zombies bleed? Do zombies bleed? No, of course not. They're the undead. Psychiatrist says, okay. He goes over to his desk drawer and takes out a pin. Walks over to the man, takes the man's finger, and goes. The man is staring out of amazement in 3, 4, 5 minutes in complete silence. And finally he looks up and he says, well, what do you know? Zombies do bleed. Moral of the story is people will see blood and they will have their own narrative. They will connect the dots to tell their own story. This is the kind of person, I'm talking about, you're all thinking, how do we know the same guy, right? This is the kind of person say, it's not what you said, it's what you didn't say. It's like, really? It's not what you said, it's the tone of voice. It's not what you said, it's what you should have said when you didn't look. It's like, there's no winning. They have a narrative that is so void of reason. Right? Because unfortunately, they're not bad people, they're just unwell. Doesn't make them fun to be around. They are not bad. They are not evil. They are just not well. We all suffer to some degree with neuroses. Right? Neurotic is the new normal, as I'm fond of saying. We all have our own shticklock, our own stuff. But on one extreme is us, most of us. I've spotted a few of you who see me afterwards. Those with nervous laughter, please come forward. Well, depending on your insurance, of course. We have neuroses. On the other hand, we have psychoses. Someone who unfortunately suffers with psychoses, right, substitutes their own version of reality. They can no longer live within the framework of this truth, so they are more than just neurotic. They are psychotic. They have their own version of reality that supersedes the objective truth. There's an old saying, it's neurotics build castles in the sky, but psychotics live in them. And psychiatrists charge rent. When you're dealing with somebody, just appreciate that they are a zombie if they're not getting it. The rule of thumb is don't let crazy people drive you crazy. They're going to try, because that's their job. That's what they do. Okay. Any questions before we go on? Yes, please.
What if you have the opportunity to jettison them from your life? You just do. You just either cut them off in a physical sense, like I can't see you anymore, or cut them off in giving them their emotional food of your reaction.
Excellent. The very good question is, what about just sort of cutting them off with your emotional reaction and so on? So here's the thing. With the exception of immediate family members, it works different by immediate family members, but if you've got somebody in your life who is just difficult, do not consider it a relationship. A relationship consists of two healthy people who are able to give and receive, and you've got the sort of unity, a wholeness, a relationship, right, that's built on sort of mutual exchange. But if a person suffers with profound low self-esteem insofar as that they are difficult, their capacity to give is handicapped. So if your expectations exceed their capacity, you're going to find yourself continually frustrated. Rather than call it a relationship, call it what it is, chesed. Kindness. That is, you choose to give when you want to give. And when you don't, you don't. But when you give, it is not with the expectation that you're going to get anything in return. It is not with the understanding that your giving will be reciprocated in kind. That's a relationship. If you're dealing with someone who is not well, again, with the exception of immediate family, call it what it is. It's chesed, meaning you choose to give. Now, when it comes to chesed, understand, if you cannot say no, you cannot say yes. Meaning, if somebody tries to guilt you into doing something, and you don't feel like you can say no, but you sell yourself that you're a tzaddik and tzedekah, you're a wonderful person, you really want to give to this person, when really, truthfully, you'd wish they were never within your purview. And you give, you're not giving, it's not chesed. You're allowing them to rob from you with your consent. You give $1,000 to a tzedakah, to a charity, it's very empowering. Somebody robs you of $1,000, it's very unempowering. Both cases, $1,000 is going out of your pocket. On the surface, it can look very similar. But if a person comes over to you and says, "Can I have your watch?" and you don't think like you could say no, are you really giving him your watch? If a person asks something of you, and you don't feel like you can say no, then you can't say yes. You're not giving. You're allowing yourself to be robbed. And this happens all the time with a certain personality type called the people pleaser. Raise your hand. No, okay. I know. We by the way, I know you're people pleasers because that's why you're here. You think the difficult people want to show up?
They don't think they're difficult.
The rest of the world is a problem. Right. They are hugely unaware. And if they think that they're the problem, it's only because of everything that was done to them. They are a victim in their story and their narrative. They are the perpetual victim. So, if you can't say no, then you can't say yes. And people pleasers are the kind of person you say, "You know what, I need a kidney." You go, "Here you go." "I need another kidney." "Okay, here you go." "I need a third kidney." "Hold on, Miko." They don't give because they want to do what's right. They allow themselves to be robbed to assuage feelings of guilt, inadequacy, shame. They don't feel like they can stand up and say no, so they simply roll over and say okay. But I want to share something with you. The beginning of infusing ourselves with a greater sense of self-esteem and self-respect is when we assert ourselves in a healthy way. And now let's get into boundaries. In the beginning of Bereshit, the beginning of Genesis, God defines and delineates all of creation. Right? Earth here, water here, land here, sky here. Different types of animals, different types of creatures, everything, light and darkness, everything has borders and boundaries. Boundaries are not meant to keep people out. They're meant to define our personal sense of space, responsibility, and obligation. We need healthy boundaries for any relationship to exist. The problem, of course, with somebody who is unwell, they don't have a clear sense of me, so they've got a lousy sense of we. They don't know where they begin and they end. Which is why people who are difficult will come into our space in a very unhealthy way. They are not doing it because they think they're doing something wrong. They just went. I'll tell you what happened. We're painting with a broad brush here, by the way. This is not about diagnosing anyone, and please, different people are going to pop into your head. But once again, broad brush, lots of asterisks to go here, and in no way are we assigning any sort of diagnosis to anyone specific. But generally speaking, is if I grow up and my boundaries were violated in some way, right? That means that my understanding of what's proper to engage with other people is corrupted. And boundaries are violated in a number of different ways.
Can you give me an example?
Sure. If when I was growing up and things were placed on me, obligations and responsibilities were thrust upon me that weren't really mine, that was a violation of my boundaries. I felt now responsible to something or someone that I really wasn't responsible for. So I've got now this feeling of shame that I'm not good enough, I've never measured up enough. Someone might be abused physically, right? In other words, somebody hurt me, somebody violated, somebody came into my personal space, in which case my awareness and understanding of what's proper has been corrupted. Right? And unfortunately, it happens. Boundaries are violated in a number of different ways: emotionally, physically, mentally, cognitively sometimes, right? Put pressure on somebody, make them assume responsibilities, make them feel like they can't measure up and like they're somehow responsible for something for someone else, right? Very often, people whose parents get divorced, right? Who does the child often feel is responsible, right? Sometimes they'll blame themselves for it. Now, that's nothing that the parents did per se, nothing that the child did per se, but children by definition are egocentric. So they now assume a responsibility, they incur a debt that really wasn't theirs. So we all, by the way, transition from childhood to adulthood with some degree of baggage. I don't know. I can think of one person who escaped from that. I'm thinking of one tremendous person. Everyone else, you know what? Some banged, some bruised, some knocked around. But the beginning of our own personal freedom, by the way, the beginning where difficult people included or notwithstanding, it doesn't make a difference, is when we begin to stop selling and telling ourselves a narrative that we've sustained over the years. You know, sometimes we've sold ourselves on a story. This is all I could do, or this is who I am, this is what I'm capable of, this is my life. Right? That was thrust on us, a story that was written by somebody else. We're just stuck. But there's things that happen, and then there's a meaning we assign to it. That meaning, right, is just based on a story that we tell ourselves. You assign a different meaning, you're going to get a different story. The problem, of course, is that as we grow up, we very often assign a meaning that there's something wrong or defective within me. And if we appreciate that the more we love ourselves, the less we care what other people think, we are moving towards emotional freedom. Let me give you an example. Let's start with this. Who wants to be my volunteer? By the way, rule of thumb as a speaker, never accept the person who volunteers, but okay.
Okay. One of us never volunteer without knowing what you're volunteering for.
That's a rule for the audience, not for me. But as a speaker, that's fine. Okay, sir. May I ask your name?
Mark.
Mark, may I call you? Oh, I guess since I call you Mark, why call you Ephraim? Because Mark is your name, right? Okay, Mark. Thank you for volunteering. By the way, I just actually, I don't want to go. Well, all right, I wanted to share with you my trauma of Spirit Airlines and volunteering, but I'll save it for another time. I don't want to take us too off. Mark, let me ask you a question. If I called you a white male wearing glasses and a black shirt, would you be offended by that? No. Okay, Mark, if I said that you called you a space alien that landed from the planet Mars and you crash landed your spaceship and you've got antennas and you're really from another planet with lots of arms and legs and all that stuff, would you be really offended by that?
No.
No. By the way, do you happen to be from another planet, Mark? No.
Question if I'm human or not, but that's another story.
See me. Medicare accepted. Mark, if you're not if you're not offended if I say something that's true, and we'll presume you're not an alien, and you're not offended if I say something that's false, when, Mark, are you ever offended?
It's a good question. I'm not offended by your second statement because it doesn't make sense to me. Why would I be offended by something that seems ridiculous?
Ah, interesting. Very good. Why would he be offended by something that seems ridiculous? Okay, now, moving off Mark for a second, we'll just sort of let that just hang in the air. If I called this chair a table, what does it say about the chair?
Nothing.
Nothing. Good. What does it say about Lieberman? That's right. It's like, go easy, people. Right. I've got a problem. When is this chair ever going to question, oh, you know what? Lieberman called me a table. I don't know. My mother was a chaise lounge. My father was a parking lounger. When is the chair ever going to begin to think, I wonder, maybe there's something to being a table, not there's anything wrong with being a table. In this day and age, you have to be so sensitive, by the way. You know? Right? You got to be PC, right? When is this chair ever going to be offended if I call it a table?
If you
Yeah.
look down on the chair.
Old jokes. Guy goes psychiatrist says, Doc, I'm a wigwam a teepee, I'm a wigwam a teepee, I'm a wigwam a teepee. I don't know. Doc, just relax. You're too tense. I said, old joke, not funny joke. Okay. When are we ever offended? When would Mark get offended? When would we get offended? Say something that's true. You're not bothered. Say something that's false, you're not bothered. Are we just the healthiest folks around town? Did we just assemble the healthiest people in one room, which, by the way, you're all quite lovely, by the way, or is it yes?
I'm denigrated or downgraded. You said something that I deemed...
Are you in computer science? Denigrated or downgraded? Wow.
No, biologist.
Biologist. Okay, yes, smarty pants. Okay. Denigrate, downgrade. Let me ask you a question. Marx maintains that if he was denigrated or downgraded, he would be upset.
Yeah.
Let's see if it's true. Mark, you're walking along, dum-da-dum-dum, on Broadway, Manhattan.
Okay.
Okay, we're going to, go out on a limb here. Or let's say you're walking along anywhere, not on Broadway. That you're offended by. How do you say it being in Manhattan on Broadway? What am I doing a good... Broadway. Whew, Broadway. Same in Borough Park? Okay. Somehow I channeled Jackie Mason on how that happened. Okay. Mark, you're walking along, and all of a sudden, it's Motzi Shabbos, and you see some, homeless person with a bottle of whatever it is they drink, and starts screaming at you, denigrating and downgrading you. How offended are you?
Not very.
Not Ray. So, permission to treat the witness as hostile, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
You maintain, Mark, just a few minutes ago, which is the lie, right? That you would be bothered if somebody denigrated, downgraded, and now we see an example where somebody denigrated and downgraded, and you're like, poor guy.
Yeah, because you consider him lower and all of that, so you're not affected.
Your ventriloquism skills are remarkable, by the way, first off. I did not see your lips move. It was freaky. And secondly, right, what this young lady is purporting, that I'm using the word right? Suggesting? I'm trying to use fancy language now. Okay. Is that Well, I'm sorry, young lady. We're not offended because you said that we know that this guy's just homeless. Yeah, right? Is not right. So is that just it? It's so the person has to not maintain a home in order for you not to be offended?
No.
Do you need proof of residency?
To hit a more exact point, someone who I have some sort of relationship, a random person on the street, homeless or wearing a suit, wouldn't offend me because I have no connection to this person.
Excellent. Good. Very good. Fair enough. Hard to argue with that. Now let me ask you another question. May I continue to... yeah, okay.
I'm good.
Okay, very good. We appreciate it, by the way. First, let's give Mark a... Mark, right? Mark? Okay. Mark, let me ask you a question. Let's assume now you're at a chasana, you're at a wedding, you're having a great time, right? Not on Broadway, in the proper place, okay? And some guy comes over to you and says, "Hey, I know you. You are a thief, a ganef. You are," and starts lacing into you. Suddenly a big crowd is forming around you. How are you feeling right about then?
Probably slightly embarrassed.
Fair enough. Now, in the middle of his tirade, another big word, come on, he goes and then he says, "You know what? And another thing, Chaim Yaakov," and you realize in that moment, as do everyone around you, that he's got the wrong guy. How are you feeling right now?
Embarrassed for him.
Ah, beautiful. Embarrassed for him. Look at what happened. Same situation, but reframed from feeling embarrassed, bad, ashamed for yourself, not even to par, to neutral, but now feeling bad for this other guy when he realizes he's screaming at a tzaddik. What was the one thing that changed?
Perception.
That's right. He's got the wrong guy. You think it's about you? It has nothing to do with you. When you're driving along and someone cuts you off, by a show of honest hands, who wants to see what that person looks like? Yeah. Who's going to bother you more? Nice little lady driving like this? Or young guy driving with a beer bottle in one hand, cigarette in the other, music blasting, cigarette smoking? Shout it out. Who's going to bother you more? Little old lady or young guy? Young guy. There's always one person that's little old lady. Where are you? Yeah. I used to live in Boca Raton, Florida. I feel for you. Shouldn't be on the road. Get that. Why are we more bothered by the young guy than we are by the little old lady? Why? Same situation?
Yeah, because they're supposed to know better.
Ah, very good. That's right. We assume the nice little lady probably didn't see our car, but the young guy did it to me on... because he doesn't...
Yeah.
Look at the insanity of this. You're driving along, then you almost get into an accident, then you risk your life, speed up to see what the person looks like to see how angry you should be. Who's the crazy one? Do you understand? That's what the ego does. It connects the dots to make everything about me. Me, 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 me. That, by the way, is how a narcissistic opera singer warms up. Me, 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 ah.
That's a good one.
Thank you. That's a good one, right. My skill in lie detection tells me that the other ones probably were not.
Well, not as good as.
Not as good. Okay, fine. Thank you. We'll keep it in the repertoire.
You're funny.
You're right. But you know, it's like the thing about, somebody's telling you you're funny. It's like I was walking with my son, got the Halloween stuff out and says, boo and scary. And I'm like, you know what? If they've got to say scary, it probably isn't. If it should really be self-evident. What sign if it's scary? You're like, oh, that's right, that is scary. But thank you for that. I appreciate that. I do try to entertain. There's a tip jar outside. I'd like to say I was kidding about that, but okay. So, where are we with this? And that is that, right? It's only the ego that makes it about us. I want you to know something. It has nothing to do with you. We think because this person's screaming at me, this person's yelling at me, it's got to be about me. It's about them and their stuff. Do you understand? Let me throw this out to somebody else. Mark has been great. If you're having a conversation with somebody and they're denigrating or downgrading you, right? And you have 100% theoretical, perfect self-esteem. You loved yourself completely and unconditionally, right? Like me, okay? What would be your singular and sole thought?
Rephrase, please.
What? I'm trying to use fancy language for Mark. If somebody is screaming at you, being mean, unpleasant, and you have complete self-esteem, you're no ego, what would be your singular and sole thought?
What's the matter with him? What's
Yeah.
the matter with
It
him?
doesn't matter. It's about them.
That's right. How much pain must this person be in to treat somebody like me like this? You have complete and total empathy. Empathy is a connection, meaning your pain is my pain. See, here's the thing. When you're in a conversation with somebody, you're focused on either one or two things. Your pain or their pain. You're focused on your pain, you're fighting an uphill battle against your own Yetzer Hara, against your own ego. You're focused on their pain, where they're coming from, their own stuff, you're free. It's not about you unless you make it about you. The person that cuts you off has nothing to do with you. Do you understand this? Now let's assume that this little old lady woke up in the morning and she put on, her nice hat and put it in here. And as you get older, more stuff goes in here, right? By the, like Bubby, it started out with tissues, then it was mints, and it was like a 7-Eleven by the time she was like 95. I don't know what it is about this wristband area here that contains a lot of. It's like, you want a sandwich, sweetheart? No, please. I don't know. No sandwiches, Bubby. Right? So she gets all her regalia together, and let's assume she's gunning for you, gunning for Mark, gunning for me. She wakes up and she says, you know what? Lieberman said don't make it about me, but you know what? It is about me. I don't like you. Tell me why we can't make it about us. If we maintain it's got nothing to do with us, why can't I say it's got nothing to do with me? It has everything to do with me.
It has everything to do with their reaction towards you and their feelings towards you. But I have another question. You said we should look at this crazy person with empathy. Does everyone deserve our empathy?
Excellent question. So, compound question. Let me get to the first part, and then we'll get to that very good question. The answer, as you alluded to, of course, is her stuff is her stuff. Here's the thing. If somebody doesn't like you, all that tells us is that somebody doesn't like you. How somebody treats you is a reflection of their self-esteem. It speaks volumes of their own emotional health and says nothing about you. You treat other people based on how you feel about yourself. We can take an example from our everyday life. When you're in a great mood, you just found out that everything is lining up. How do you treat the entire world from the quote-unquote bottom to the top? How are you treating everyone?
Very well.
Oh, love. Oh, everything is coming up roses. When you've got a toothache, you're in a lousy mood, you just found out X, Y, or Z, how are you treating everyone from top to bottom except for the people who positively you can't get away with it? Now, did those people suddenly become less deserving? Did their self-esteem diminish because you're in a foul mood? What happened to your giving to them? Did they change? No. Your capacity in that moment changed. Your ability to give was corrupted. How somebody treats you has nothing to do with you. When you own that, you're free. You only make it about you if you make it about you. The only reason you get upset, get sensitive, is because you think maybe there's something to it. Maybe they're denigrating, downgrading, speaking to me like this, being insulting, offensive, embarrassing, because maybe I'm not worthwhile. And that's when we get upset. But if we had unconditional self-love for ourselves, I would recognize it's not about me. Your stuff is your stuff, and we've got plenty of stuff. We don't need to make other people's stuff our stuff too. Going to your question, does everyone deserve our empathy? Let's understand, what is empathy? Empathy, we said briefly before, is the ability, capacity to feel someone else's pain. Empathy is not sympathy. Sympathy is a low level of relationship. Sympathy is really fosters a disconnection. You know what? I just found out that you've got a problem, but I'm going to go back to my Frosted Flakes because, you know what? It's your problem. It's not my problem. It doesn't interfere with the quality of my life. I may feel bad for you, but I'm not in pain because of it. In much the same way that, we could care for the world's problems and everyone around us, but get a throbbing toothache, and all those problems disappear, and all you're focused on is yourself. So the more a person becomes consumed with their own emotional stuff, the smaller that circle shrinks in terms of to whom they pay attention to, who they care about, who they're able to connect with. So the more self-esteem I have, the greater my ability to have empathy, because I'm not consumed with anyone I'm not consumed entirely with myself. I have the capacity to connect with other people. You can empathize with whomever you choose to empathize with. Empathy is a beautiful thing. Certainly, if somebody is inherently evil, right, which hopefully you don't run into too many of those people, there's your requirement to empathize, no longer is active. But barring that, you can empathize with the fact that somebody is in pain. Somebody's acting out in a way that's irresponsible, reckless, abusive, right? And if you're not absorbed in your own stuff, then you can actually have compassion for that person, actually have real empathy for that person. Okay, any other questions?
How does it express itself? Empathy.
Very good question, my gosh. We should give a talk just on this because I've given a talk just on this. How does empathy express itself? So with your permission, I'm going to give you the short answer now. But let me also just tell you, if you go to this great website, Torah Anytime, TorahAnytime.com, I have 100 talks, literally, 100 talks on different subjects, including something on this. I'm just going to give you the short answer, and then if it's okay, we're just going to pivot back to this. Empathy expresses itself with validation. To empathize with somebody is useless unless they actually can quantify it and know that you feel their pain, and that happens through validation. Validation means is that I understand based on your perspective. I don't have to agree with it. People say, how can I validate that person? They're just crazy. Validation doesn't mean you agree. Validation means is based on where your perspective is, how you're seeing things. I understand this is causing you a lot of pain, right? Your child gets upset because their toy broke. You know it's not the end of the world. Doesn't even come close to it. But to tell your child what's the big deal, it's a toy, how well is that going to go over? In much the same way that you get a dent in your car, I got news for you. It's not the end of the world. How well is that going to go over? Right? Whatever is important is important. So introducing reality to somebody who's in pain is not a healthy thing. What is a healthy thing is to establish that connection through validation. I could see, like a small child, I could see why this causes you such pain. My gosh, this was your favorite toy. You loved this toy and now it broke, right? See, what happens is this, just from a math standpoint, a spiritual, emotional math standpoint, when a person is in pain, they feel isolated. They feel cut off. When you empathize and validate, what you do is you share that pain and you're literally alleviating some of the burden because they have a connection. They no longer feel isolated. That isolation is what exacerbates the pain. You feel alone. No one understands. No one cares. When somebody shares that burden with you, when somebody validates you, right, you no longer feel alone, and now you feel that burden lifted, which is why sharing your friend's load, sharing their pain, as it were, is an actual commandment. It's a mitzvah. So, the long answer to a very good question is empathy comes through validation, but again, I would, with your permission, we're just going to go ahead and shift back to this. Okay, any other questions so far on what we've been covering? All right. What happens when we're put in that proverbial no-win situation? Somebody asks something of you that you don't want to do. If you don't do it, they're mad at you. If you do it, who's mad at you? You're mad at you. This come up often?
Yeah.
Okay. I want to show you how to escape from this. First, it doesn't matter whether you feel like doing or not. It's a matter of right and wrong. It's either responsible or irresponsible. Right? We said before, if you can't say no, then you can't say yes. If the person is asking something of you, you have to ask yourself first, is it responsible for me to give this person what they're asking? Now, we don't always have our clarity, acuity, the ability to see clearly ourselves because our ego is a piece of our own puzzle. Which is why Chazal, the rabbis in Pirkei Avos, Ethics of the Father, say get yourself a friend, the rabbi. Because we, even the wisest of men, cannot achieve the one thing that someone else can, and that is objectivity. So you can ask somebody, you know what, so-and-so asked me to do this. And you may be shocked at what comes back. They may say, are you kidding for even considering it? Or they'll be like, what's the big deal? You're letting all of your stuff get in the way, right? I will share with you that, I was speaking with somebody who was locked into a pattern for literally 50 years of his life. with a sibling, and the sibling had continually sort of thrust his own obligations onto this other person. And I said, it's time just to wait. He couldn't, it took a while for him to realize, my gosh, I've been sold a narrative that this is how it just is. It's crazy land. It's momish, it's just crazy land. So we don't always have clarity. So ask somebody. And then when you decide it's either right or wrong, here is what you do. You either say yes if it's responsible, besimcha, with joy. Infuse joy into it. Don't do it begrudgingly. Do it with joy. And if it's a responsible thing to say no, then you say no guilt-free. And here is the most important part. What bothers us about these relationships and these demands from people is that we get bothered. What upsets us is that we get upset. We get thrown off of our equilibrium, our emotional perch. Somebody just pushed us off merely because we had the unfortunate luck to pick up the phone and say hi. Right? We get thrown off by this person and we feel like we're stuck, we're locked in. The more calm you are in your response, the easier it is time and time and time again. Understand this, please. This is so fundamental in dealing with somebody that has no sense of boundaries. You cannot do what's irresponsible merely because somebody will get upset with you if you don't do what they want you to do. That is sheer recipe for injuring your own self-esteem and the relationship. Understand this. You cannot move away from what's responsible merely because somebody will get upset with you if you don't do what they want. I'm sorry, one second please. I have a couple of questions. Not you, only because I'll lose my train of thought and then who knows where we'll end up. Okay. So, it's either right or it's wrong. Now, this person's job, right, is to not hear the no. You know what I'm talking about? Right? Yes. They move past no. And no answer will satisfy them other than yes. You cannot give an answer other than no. Because no matter what answer you give, it'll only be used as proof as to why you're being the bad guy, why you're being unyielding, why you're not being... What do you mean you're in the hospital getting a kidney? You've got enough energy to keep your jello down, but you can't watch my dog for 2 weeks? It's like... Suddenly you feel like you're the crazy one for not accommodating them. And they're so good at twisting and contorting things where you come out thinking, oh, well, I guess, maybe. No answer will satisfy them. That is why you don't give an answer. Now you're going to want to give an answer. 2 rules. Don't give an answer. Rule number 2, when you really want to give an answer, see rule number 1. You're going to want to give an answer because you think this person has got to understand. But we forget that they're not thinking. They're not reasonable. They're not rational. It's reasonable to you because you're reasonable people. To him or to her, all they see is somebody who's being selfish. You're being selfish. You're being mean. You're not being nice. You're being unfair. How could you do this? And they're going to paint a story that will spin your head around. By the time you're done, you're thinking, my God, what an awful person I am for not even saying yes right away. No answer will satisfy them. You're going to want to give an answer because that's what you do. You try to explain things reasonable, but they're not reasonable. Okay, questions? Mark, yes?
No, your definition about stepping back and assessing the situation. In this conundrum, is there a right, is there a wrong? Isn't that by definition what we would call peer pressure? The situation in front of you, you let someone else control your actions without actually thinking of it.
Excellent, right. So the very good question Mark asked is in that situation, determining whether it's right or wrong, I guess how does peer pressure sort of factor into that? Which is, it goes to exactly the point is, we don't always have that clarity, which is why you need an objective input from somebody else, often to say, if you have the luxury of time, to say, hey, this is what this person asked of me, this is the relationship, is this something I should be doing, or is this something I should really just draw a boundary line with? Because here's the thing. Again, we said before, if you do it right, you're mad at you. You don't do it, they're mad at you. I want you to walk out of this with this understanding. They don't need an excuse to be mad at you. If it's not this, it'll be the next thing. It'll be the next thing you did but didn't do well enough. So if there's a choice between you being mad at you and them being mad at you, always pick them being mad at you. Because you're being mad at you, that anger turned inward turns into guilt, anxiety, shame, and depression. which is in my book called... No, not guilt anxiety. It's, yes, guilt anxiety. Never get angry again. Thank you. Right? That's what it does. It eats away at us, and somehow we feel like we're the bad guy.
So what happens if you say no, but that person actually will continuously write emails?
Yes,
and
yeah.
also will tell other people?
Excellent. Good. Very good practical question. Look, what happens? You say no, and this person continue to write emails, and they're going to have a whole campaign. Here's the thing. When it comes to, by the way, I do some work with threat assessment. Like, let's say somebody gets a letter, somebody's, blackmailed, or somebody this or that. Is it genuine, is it not? Here's a rule of thumb when dealing with people that are very, unhealthy or persistent. Let's say they keep on email, whatever. If you respond, it's so tempting to respond, right? They email you and you ignore it. Email you, and it's like, okay, I can't let this go anymore. I'm just going to go ahead and tell them, you are crazy. Here are the facts. You've done that. How many times have you done that?
Always.
Now, let me ask you a single question. Has it ever worked once? Never. Okay. You understand something? Is that we think like other people are thinking like we are. And you say, oh no, this person thinks this, let me just go ahead and just write, and you make the sentences so beautiful, you spend a lot of time on it, right? And you check it, and it's beautiful, you read it out loud, you say it's almost poetic. You send it with the expectation they're going to say is, my gosh, please forgive me for being so foolish, and instead you get a letter back that is so long, right? Filled with lots of typos, because they're not typing, by the way, they're just talking into it, right? That's what they're doing. They don't have they're not trust me, they're not typing. They're talking into it just because that's what they do. And you are expecting a response. So the rule of thumb is you don't engage. Because what happens is, let's say after the 20th email, you answer back. All you've done is train them that it takes 20 emails to get an answer from you. So how many are you going to get now, more or less? Right? Ignore. Now, this doesn't mean, of course, that we ignore people and so on, but just if somebody's being belligerent and sort of in a harassment sort of zone, different than what we've been speaking about. This is a asterisk to our conversation. That's the rule of thumb. And in terms of the larger question about, let's say this person has a whole campaign against you. Here's the thing. You don't think for a second that the rest of the world doesn't know the score. Right? They know you, they know those people. We're responsible for our character, not our reputation. Our job is to be a mensch, to do the right thing. And then win, lose, or draw, we're going to come out ahead. You cannot accommodate an emotional terrorist because they're going to go ahead and do X, Y, Z. Okay? You cannot control that. You can't control their emotions. You can't control their actions. You cannot control them. All you can do is control yourself, and that is the only obligation. Okay? Okay. Any other questions? Yes, please.
So it seems to me like I have a different philosophy. Like if somebody's difficult, most people are normal, so I just don't want to have a relationship with that person. Like,
Okay.
I just walk away. It's not working.
Fine. So the statement this gentleman is making, and we'll end on this, is that he's saying, look, you know what? Sometimes it's just not worth it. So if somebody's being difficult, just walk away. Here's the thing I would just politely suggest. You can walk away out of strength or out of weakness. And how you do it makes all the difference in the world. And much the same way that giving a donation to being robbed has a different psychological effect, right? Give a donation, feel good. Be robbed, less good. If you walk away because you cannot deal, because this person is belittling you and you just don't want to deal, you're not walking away with strength. If you do recognize that this is a person in pain, see, here's the thing. Self-esteem allows for us to see a situation with crystal clear clarity and respond appropriately. Right? When self-esteem doesn't necessarily mean that we're standing there and we just turn the other cheek. That's the other guys. It's not us. Self-esteem says, I'm not going to let my ego get involved. Meaning if I'm being screamed at 99% of the time, if I have a beautiful self-esteem, I'm going to recognize this person's in pain, it's their stuff. I'm going to empathize, validate, say, oh, Ma, that's really tough, I'm so sorry, whatever. And then, you know what? Oftentimes they just sort of run out of stuff and that's the end of it. My ego gets involved, one of two things are going to happen. I'm either going to get defensive, I'm going to get upset, I'm going to fight back, gets me nowhere, or I'm going to be that doormat mentality, just going to sit there and take it because I don't think I'm capable of doing anything else. So, it all depends on why you're disengaging and how you disengage. If you disengage by saying, you know what, this person's got their stuff, I don't have to make their stuff my stuff. They're not a family member. They're not a whatever. They're just being difficult for no good reason. And you know what? I don't have to let more difficult people into my life. I'm already filled up with family members, right? Then you can politely excuse yourself from that relationship. But if you're moving away out of fear, anxiety, and resentment, while I'm not suggesting, I don't know the dynamics, that might not be an ultimate goal, I would suggest that it's not the healthiest way, to move away. Because there's sometimes you do have to take a break from the relationship, but how you do it makes all the difference in the world. So, yes, please, quick question.
I have a question for you. My life experiences have told me and shown me that when I over-empathize with a person or feel for their situation, in any given situation that they might be encountering, I find that the person might be inclined or would start taking advantage of me in particular. And I've experienced that, and it's from a personal perspective, it's a pretty horrible feeling.
I don't disagree. What this gentleman is saying is that, look, he finds, may I repeat the question out loud? Yeah?
Yeah, sure.
Is that when he empathizes with some folks, is they use that as an opportunity to go ahead and get his hooks into him. They found, a willing participant who's going to absorb some of his pain, right? Maybe some of his time, money, energy, and heartache, and he sort of attaches, gloms onto this because you're giving them one thing that he's so desperately craving. So I would politely suggest that empathy, right, doesn't mean that this person has gained access to you. Empathy means that you are allowing a bridge to him. And that's a bridge that, like a drawbridge, you can bring up and you can bring down at your will. When you begin to feel like he's like a Trojan horse, you've sort of laid that bridge of empathy, and now he's rushing across, making you feel guilty because you're not doing other things. He ends up sort of, he ends up breaching boundaries at this point. Then is a very good time for you to take a step back, draw that bridge back up. Yeah, go ahead.
Sort of matter of fact, just say no. Just kind of just say,
right, but
give me space.
That's right. But again, that's what we've got to know ourselves and our own boundaries. If we're the kind of person, salespeople will tell you the easiest person to sell to is the one that's got the sign that says no salesmen or solicitors, right? That person puts the sign up. Why? Because they know that if a salesman knocks on their door, they're done. They're going to buy whatever it is. They can't help themselves. So, we've got to know ourselves. And if you're dealing with somebody who doesn't have a good sense of boundaries, and you feel like empathizing is going to provide them with an unhealthy launching pad to invade or pervade into your space, then it does make sense to take a step back. But ultimately and wholly, here's how it works. We have to appreciate, again, that how people treat us is a reflection of their own self-esteem. You don't have to make it about you because it's not about you. It's only about you if you make it about you. That person that cuts you off, you see what they look like, and then you determine. So you're determining whether or not how someone treats you, right, is about you. And much the same way, you're at that wedding, someone's screaming at you, you've got to remind yourself, they've got the wrong person. It's not about you unless you make it about you. Don't make other people's stuff your stuff. And ultimately remind ourselves that everyone in our lives, as we began with, is a shliach, a messenger from Hashem, from God, for our good and for our growth. And we have to ask ourselves, what's the message? What am I supposed to learn from this situation? And ultimately, our ability to act responsibly, to take responsibility for ourselves, will free us from that emotional dependency on other people. And with that, I'd like to thank you so much for listening, for the opportunity to share these ideas here. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. There is a book, it's a sponsored edition, it's for $5 outside there, called See Peace and Pursue It. It covers some of the ideas here. You can also go online, again, it's a great resource, TorahAnytime.com, for not just myself, but a number of really great Shurim, great talks on these talks and relationships. And also, if you're interested in the book on anger, it's a nice book called Never Get Angry Again. If you have any questions, anything on your mind, feel free to come up. I'll try and help you in any way I can. Thank you so much for inviting me, Rabbi. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you. Thank you. My pleasure.